Welcome to another surprise episode on the Abandoned STI, where I'm so pumped on the way this car feels with the G30 under the hood. I want to take you for a rip so we can discuss how the real world feel translates from those dyno numbers that we showed you in the previous episode. So to quickly recap, if you didn't watch last episode, we of course swapped out our G25-660 turbocharger for a G30-660. And as you'll know if you watched that previous episode, the compressor side of both of those turbos is identical. So the only change is on the exhaust side, where the turbine on the G30 is larger. I believe it's 6 mil larger on the inducer and 5 mil larger on the exducer. And the housing is larger too. So we went from a 9.2 housing on the G25 to a 101 housing on this G30. And wow, what a difference it made. This thing clearly needed more breathing on the exhaust side because it completely woke this thing up. It's like a whole new animal. And on the dyno, those numbers were impressive. It went from a peak of 403 on the G25 to a peak of 484 now on this G30. And that's 80 wheel, which is a lot of power, but man, in the real world, it feels like a completely different car. It's an absolute animal, where before it just felt a little choked, a little like something was strangling a little bit. And Pete and I would often say, like, what's wrong with this setup? It just doesn't feel like it wants to rip. And now with this turbo on it, it feels the way we always wanted it to feel. It feels like it just wants to rip, and it really does go like a rocket ship. So I'm stoked on how good it feels on the street. I've only made a couple of pulls on a new tune that Mike from Cobb Tuning sent me, which of course he would have pulled a bit of timing out of it, maybe a pound or two of boost as well, but it feels so much faster than it does before. I'm actually really stoked for Pete to try it, because Pete did a lot of break-in miles in this car last year. So even though he hasn't driven it this year, I'm sure he'll still remember how that feels. And of course, I want to show you how it feels too, because it is properly quick. Feeling a little bit guilty, in fact, how much better it is, because the Evo 6 is going to have its hands full with it now. But I don't know. I think the Evo is still going to give it a run for its money, because that thing is a lot lighter. And we know from some other guys running G25s on Evos that they do respond well on those 4G63s. So anyway, I think we may have found the right turbo for this EJ207. And if you haven't watched the engine build series on this, go back and watch that. We did a 4-part series with Valvoline last year, where we built this JDM EJ207 engine with NV Auto. It's stroked at 2.1 liters. It has a pocket ported head from Head Games. It's got good stuff in the valve train. It's a properly built motor, so it was always built to push hard. And now I feel like with this G30 on it, we can finally really, kind of give it the beating it always wanted, or we always wanted to give it. So with that said, maybe it's time to jump in the car, Pete, and go for a rip.
All right, let's see what this thing's made of today.
I wasn't revving it all the way out either, but you can see it just barely falls out of boost.
Yeah.
I was short shifting a little more than I should have, but I find if I go right to the limiter, when I shift, I'm still in boost, well, so I don't get that big pause.
It doesn't have that lag that it had before, which is just absolutely insane.
Yeah, it feels more responsive.
It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't understand, because on the dyno we could see it was spooling, what, 900 RPM? Yeah. Although on the VP tune it was spooling more closely to the V25.
I think we're like 500-600 RPM.
Yeah.
So it's you know what, and like I don't know, it's kind of hard to know whether the lag is essentially there or not. Like I still feel it is a little laggy coming on, but like in between shifts, that was my biggest gripe with it before.
Yeah.
Whereas like it just struggled to like come back in very quickly.
And I think it's because it had a flat top end on the power curve before, so the temptation was to shift earlier because you felt like the motor was falling off.
Right.
Now it pulls so hard to redline, you're shifting at redline and it's keeping you in boost better. So it's, I think because we picked up like another 500 to 1,000 usable RPM on the very top end, now we're using the power band that this motor really was built for.
Yeah.
It just feels like a better match, It just feels paired up properly. And wow, I mean, that extra top end just pushes you back in the seat.
For sure it does. Holy smokes, the difference is big.
And this isn't the full 484 tune. Like Mike sent me a street, like a safe street version, because he wanted to take some logs just to be sure that the dyno tune is, the way the dyno is loading is the same as the real world. Sometimes there's little differences between the way the real world loads your motor and the dyno does. So he just wants to check that and make sure we're safe.
Give me another one of these pulls, DP. I'm starting to get addicted to the the juice that this thing's making. So shift this thing to 8 grand, buddy. Give her. There you go. Wow. Oh my God.
Holy shit.
Man, this thing moves, dude.
You're right though, I am short shifting.
Yeah, you're
the tack really needs to go to 8 on here.
Yeah. Wowzers.
And it stays in boost when you shift at 8.
Woo! Yeah, like it's incredible. The lag that we experienced before.
It's gone.
I thought I was like attributing it to long intercooler piping and all that, but it was just the back pressure. Like it was just causing everything to slow down and like have to reboot between shifts.
I think so.
And now it's just like the flow is there.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah, we were clogging the system up.
Yeah,
If you think of it in plumbing terms, it was just kind of clogged up, and it just feels so much happier. And
wow,
it's like this engine can finally breathe.
It's incredible. And for those of you, like in the previous video, a bunch of people mentioned that, you know, why didn't we go to the 8.3 housing, because it may, you know, get rid of that lag that we saw on the dyno. The fact of the matter is that, as we explained, that housing flows the same amount as the G25 housing that we took off.
Yeah.
So yes, there may be an incremental increase in power, but you're not going to see what you see with the 101. Like we really needed a large housing to push that exhaust through to let this thing move.
Yeah, like from like an R&D standpoint, it might have been interesting to try that 8.3 housing.
And we still may, right?
We may, and that will tell you just what the larger turbine does.
Yes.
But in real world terms, like you're going to make a change in your turbo, you're going to make a big enough change that it's measurable and really it's going to pay off. And Mike from Cobb Tuning was pretty insistent that we needed the bigger housing to get this top end that we want from this motor to kind of match the power band of the motor. So yes, we could have gone with a smaller housing to kind of see just what the turbine does, but with this bigger housing, it just feels like such a good match. And in the real world, it's not laggy.
No,
it's
honestly,
not laggy at all. It's very responsive.
I don't notice the difference. I honestly don't. And I think that's the real takeaway that we need to stress here is, yes, on the dyno, you may see that, but from like a full throttle pull here, that 500 RPM difference is really difficult to see.
Yeah,
it really is.
Yeah, I don't feel it. Even cruising on the highway and maybe dropping a gear and making a pull, like it's instant power and it's just so much stronger. There's so much of it that in terms of what you're experiencing in the real world, the car just feels faster, more responsive. It just feels the way I think we kind of imagined this build would feel.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is too, if you adjust your train of thought, like, oh, I got to rev this thing a little bit higher.
Yes.
Then that in itself is going to kind of eliminate the need for you to be down low. Like just this thing now, you know, like almost revs to 8K. Why not drive it like that? Like, yeah, so what? You got to be at 4,500 RPM sometimes if you really want to romp it, but like. And
the gearing in this car is short. Like cruising on the highway, you're at 3,500 RPM. Like this motor revs.
Yes.
You just have to think of it in terms of like being more like a Honda motor where it needs revs to make power.
Whereas, you know, I think a lot of Subaru guys are used to the
Torque-Gear 2.5
that you know, you don't really need to get all those crazy revs going.
Yeah.
So.
And I mean, I'm obviously still adjusting to it too because I'm short shifting at 7,500.
All right, so now let's see what, like real world, we're cruising this is 3,500 RPM.
Yeah, like,
yes, and then
definitely took a second to spool up there.
For sure.
But if I'm at say 4,500 RPM, it's a lot more instantaneous. Like it's just there.
Yeah, and you can tell like it's ramping, but even with that ramping, there is good power there. It's not like it's
not
on-off switch, right? Where it just like hits like this.
Yeah.
It has that ramp, so it does take time to spool, but you're still making whatever it is, like 200 wheel horsepower. So
exactly, you're making plenty of power, and frankly, you wouldn't want it to hit any harder than it hits.
No,
it would be kind of undrivable. So I like the way that there's some progression there, and then it does come on quite strongly, but not so strongly that you're like lighting up the tires or feeling like you're, you know, kind of out of control.
Yep, yeah. It'd be interesting to see how this turbo does on a 2.5 and how much more spool and you pick up RPM down low.
Yeah.
But, I mean, for this setup, you know what? For what we had and now what we have, it's such a difference. I think it was well worth the effort. I think the experiment proved to be exceptional in that sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Like, it makes so much power. It's got me, you know, really rethinking. Like I was so confident that the Evo was going to beat up
too,
on
which
this
is why
car.
I did this.
Yeah. And now I'm like, holy smokes, this thing is a, you know, like this thing mobs good.
It's proper.
It's a proper ripper.
It is. Yeah, I'm really stoked on it. And as a road car too, I really enjoy driving this thing. It's got, I mean, it's 10 years newer than the Evo, so it's not really an apples to apples comparison. But the interior in this thing is really nice. Really, the only thing I don't like is the head unit.
Yeah.
It's very dated, and I can't play music off my phone on it.
Right.
That's like the one drawback to this as a daily driver. But otherwise, I love this thing on the street. You've got amazing visibility, you got the practicality of a hatchback. I think it looks really clean and subtle, yet aggressive.
Yeah.
Like, I don't feel like a boy racer driving around in this.
Right.
I feel like a grown man, but people still look at it and go, oh, that's sick. So
Yeah.
people who know kind of thing, you know?
For sure, and I think Subarus have always been the better road cars. Evos were never built for that. You know, when I was driving the Evo 6 on the highway, it's revving at 4,000 RPM at like 120 kilometers an hour, which I think is like what, you know, just 75 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So it's certainly not built to be a cruising car, an everyday car. It's more of like that track.
It's a raw machine,
like
for
raw
sure. Yeah.
sports sedan. So there is a trade-off with the Evo in that sense. I will give it to the Subaru. It is the better road car, 100%. But you know, I still think the Evo is going to bring a good amount to the table. We just got to make sure that you know, it makes like the 550 on that car. I don't think is going to. I think it's a 400-ish wheel horsepower setup at the peak. So we're going to see how it goes. It's going to be interesting to see the dyno results.
I think it's going to be a really great battle now that this car has a bit of a power advantage because it is heavier. This thing is probably 300 or 400 pounds heavier than the Evo.
Yeah.
So I think on power to weight ratio, they're still going to be very close.
It's going to be awesome, man. It's like 6-speed versus the 5-speed. That turbo comes on way quicker, so I'm going to have like that instant throttle response advantage. It's going to be super cool, man. I'm pumped for it.
Yeah, I'm going to top end you everywhere, PT, but the question is, will I catch you fast enough?
Yeah, man. It's going to be super cool. So, well, are we gonna wrap it up on that? I
think so, man. I'm loving this car. I'm so pumped on it, and I've never been a Subaru guy. This is my first real Subaru experience, but I have to say I've come to really appreciate this car and kind of understand why people love these cars so much. I think this thing is an awesome road car. I'm pumped to get it back out to the track again and really like spend some more time with it in that environment. Because last year we just did that one track battle, really. So yeah, man, I'm sold. I might be becoming a Subaru guy here. So much so that we are talking about future projects.
Yes, like in the previous video we mentioned, we would love to do another one. I
think a 2.5 and a GC would be pretty sick.
Yeah, man,
so,
that'd be super cool.
Let us know what you guys think, and we will see you in the next one where hopefully we're making some real power on the dyno with that Evo.
Yeah, guys, so stay tuned and make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't, make sure to hit that notification bell because honestly it does help us grow the channel, which is ultimately what we need to do to continue to create this great content. Well, I can feel it corners pretty well.
Yeah, it really does.